Hey, welcome to Board with Life News for October 14th. Today we're going to talk about Upper Deck's Legendary series. We're going to talk about the new partnership between IDW Publishing and Pandasaurus Games. And we're going to talk about the Kickstarter for Mars Attacks, the miniature game. Hey, I'm Chris. Welcome to Board with Life News. Unintentionally, a lot of the news this week is around, or all of the news that I'm going to talk about, is around licensed games. So I'm going to talk very briefly about that. Licensing games is an interesting thing because while on the one hand, it can totally be a way for publishers or designers or developers to sell us a subpar game because it's a property that we love. And then it's even worse because it's not just a bad game, it's a bad game based on something we love. So it can be a double-edged sword because the other side of that is sometimes they are great games. And if it's a good game especially, it's a wonderful way to introduce people to our hobby. People that maybe don't know anything about board games or wouldn't want to play a board game, but then you go, but the Game of Thrones board game's pretty good. And then they go, well, I like Game of Thrones, I'll play this. And then they play it and it's a good game and they love it. For example, one of the very first kind of deeper board games I played was Battlestar Galactica. And I picked it up because I was just starting to get into board games and I liked Battlestar Galactica. And it turns out that that's a fantastic licensed game. So it is a way that it can bring people to the hobby, which is really cool, as long as they're good. I mean, it can bring people if they're bad, but it might turn them off to the hobby. So it's a kind of double-edged sword. So that being said, let's get into the news stories this week. A couple years ago, Upper Deck produced a deck building game called Legendary, and it was a Marvel-themed deck building game. And then a couple months back, they announced that they're going to be doing a version of that game that's going to be based around the Alien franchise from the Alien movies and all of that stuff. And it's going to be called Encounters. They've released a little bit more information on it now. It's going to be a cooperative deck building game, and they said that it will be compatible but not integrated with the Marvel Legendary deck building game. So that's interesting. They also dropped some news that they're going to be doing Legendary series games for Predator and Firefly. So that's a whole lot of licensing stuff. If they have half a brain, which I imagine they do, there's totally going to be Aliens versus Predators, because that's a no-brainer. And then Firefly will be interesting. Firefly had a very popular game at Gen Con this year that's continuing to be popular, so obviously that's a franchise that people are still very interested in. So we'll see how those go. I'm a big fan of deck-building games, so hopefully they're good. In other news, Pandasaurus Games announced a new partnership with IDW Publishing. Pandasaurus has mainly been an importer of games. They did Yido and Tammany Hall, as well as some others. And IDW Publishing is a comic book publisher. They announced their first two games are going to be for the popular properties 30 Days of Night, which that one's kind of a no-brainer. I think it's IDW's most popular, famous property. And then another game for Kill Shakespeare. And I was actually unfamiliar with this property. Reading about it, it seems kind of like Fables meets League of Extraordinary Gentlemen plus Shakespeare. So I like Fables and I like League of Extraordinary Gentlemen and I like Shakespeare, so I might have to check it out. There's not a lot of information on who's designing them or what the games are going to be, but that's pretty cool. And they also plan to produce a lot more games. They're IDW made IDW games, which means maybe we're going to get a Lock and Key game. And Lock and Key is fantastic, and it would make such a good board game. I'm super excited about it. Lock and Key is written by Joe Hill, who is Stephen King's son. Not that that has anything to do with anything, but, whatever. That's take it to the bank. But it's kind of this haunted housey, sort of Lovecraftian, horror-y, mystery, fantasy comic book property that's great. I think that they have a deal with like HBO or something. I think there's a development deal where they're gonna maybe make a show. It was one of the properties that after The Walking Dead was huge, got bought up because everybody went, oh, we need a comic book TV show. So there might be some licensing issues with that, but I don't know. But oh man, my fingers are crossed because that would be such a fun game. Now let's head over to Kickstarter Corner. Sticking with the unintentional theme of licensed games, the Kickstarter corner for this week is on Mars Attacks, the miniatures game. Mars Attacks, the miniatures game looks like a pretty traditional tabletop miniatures game. It's designed by Jake Thornton, who did Dreadball, amongst some other games. There's not a lot of information on the gameplay or anything like that. Nothing looks revolutionary or amazing, but let's be honest, the reason you want to buy this game is because they're super rad Mars Attacks miniatures, and they look awesome. So if you're into Mars Attacks, you probably want to hop on this because that's pretty cool. I think it costs $100, but you get a whole slew of stuff with the game. So yeah, head over to their Kickstarter if that's something that interests you. All right, guys, you gotta ask questions. I'm running out of questions, so put them in the YouTube comments of this video because I need more questions to answer if I want to keep doing this segment at the end of things, and I do want to keep doing this segment at the end of things. So make sure you submit your questions. I'm gonna remind you again at the end of the show because I need those questions. I'm gonna eat them up. That's a weird thing to do, Chris. This week's question comes from Anthony Ariello via YouTube, and he asks, what is your current favorite game to play? The game that I kind of most am eager to have hit the table these days is Speicherstadt. I had to read it because I always pronounce it wrong, and I'm sure I still did, but whatever. It's by Stefan Feld, and I picked it up recently. It had kind of slipped through the cracks. It came out a couple years ago, but Feld produces so many great games that it's easy to miss on a couple. And it's fantastic. It's a bidding game that kind of integrates some worker placement aspects to it. It scratches that Euro itch, but it only takes about 45 minutes to play. It's very easy to teach. It's a very elegant game in its simplicity, but there's a lot of depth to strategy. I'm a huge fan of it. That's our show this week. We got a new bit coming out tomorrow. We're gonna make sure to subscribe to the channel. We have a whole lot of stuff coming out planned for October that's gonna come out on maybe random days. So you wanna keep up with that. And yeah, make sure to ask questions. Please ask questions. Go right now and ask a question. All right, see you next week.